Thanks everybody, and welcome to the panel. It's like last thing of this year's Emberfest. And like one thing I want to make clear from the beginning, when you see me looking at the phone, it doesn't mean I'm bored by the conversation, but I have notes here, right? Without which I could like not do the panel very well, I think. So. I mean, the last few years we always had panels like with the core team, right, talking about the future of Ember and sort of what's planned, what's coming, and so on. And this year we have a bit of a different panel, and we want to hear from users, right, from companies using Ember, and specifically, I think, from kind of leading tech companies that like are maybe also seen as kind of role models for like by some other companies. So I think sort of their perspective is particularly interesting, and we wanna hear about like why they use Ember, right? Why they sort of continue to use Ember, whether they have concerns. Maybe also we want to talk a bit about sort of things I covered in my talk yesterday as well, and their future plans with Ember and so on, right? Like I guess some of you have heard about Heroku's announcement to migrate some React apps back to Ember, which is of course particularly interesting because it's kind of something you rarely hear, right? So that's kind of what we want to talk about, you know, for the next 30 minutes or so. Usually our panelists run a bit over, but that's fine. And then afterwards, like you see sort of the party stuff there already. And we will start with introductions, right? So we have Jesse White from Heroku here, connected from the US somewhere. I'm not sure where exactly. Then we have Jesse's brother, Jamie White. It's not actually his brother, but Jamie works for HashiCorp. And then we have Catalan from Intercom, who you saw in his talk already a few hours ago. And I'd like to introduce you. I'd like to ask you all to introduce yourselves. Let's maybe start with Jesse.
Hi, I'm Jesse White. I manage the front-end engineering teams here at Heroku. I'm very happy to be here with Jamie. I used to work really closely with him, and it's good to see him again. And really excited to be part of the conference. I live in Pagosa Springs, Colorado, which is a very, very small town in southern Colorado. So that's where I'm coming from.
Jamie White, not actually related to Jesse, but I from the UK originally, but live in Spain now, so this was a really obvious trip for me. As Marco said, I work at HashiCorp now. I used to work at Heroku with Jesse, as he said, and I, many years ago, used to run the Ember meetups in London and a couple of mini one-day conferences that we did, and I've been involved with Ember stuff since 2011, 2012, something like that. So it's been a really big part of my career and life.
I'm Pat White. No, actually, no. Pat O'Callaghan. So yeah, you're getting 2 doses of me today. So I'm on the front-end tech team at Intercom. I've been at Intercom for I think it's coming up nearly 10 years now. So yeah, been pretty much using Ember for nearly almost that 10 years. So it's great to be here.
Yeah, thanks. And like I said, I'd like to start talking about sort of why all of your companies use Ember, right? Sort of what made you choose it, in the beginning, if anybody even remembers, because I think all of you have been using Ember for a very long time, or all of your companies. But also, sort of why do you stick with Ember? Why is it like the right tool for what you're building? And maybe go the other way around. Start with Pat.
Yeah, so when I joined Intercom in 2014, it's quite a small company. At the time, it was a kind of Rails views, jQuery kind of mess. And we were there was a few internal discussions at the time about maybe we should refactor to some sort of client-side framework. And there was not really strong opinions at the time. A few of us had used Angular, but no one was really kind of putting their head in the block. Gavin Joyce, who a lot of people probably know, he also joined around the same time, and he had used Ember at a few previous roles, and he was like, "Let's just do an experiment. I'm really bullish on this. And we were like, yeah, we're happy to try it. So we did an experiment where, if you've ever used Intercom, we have this like user list where you can interact. You can see all your customers. You can slice and dice them from different locations in the world and stuff like that. So we gave ourselves, so it was myself, Gavin, and like two other engineers. And we just gave ourselves an experiment. Would be like, okay, let's try and rebuild this in 3 weeks and see what happens. We ended up rebuilding it in 1.5 weeks, and we just added like a load more features on top of that, and in that 3-week timescale. And we have a culture where every Friday we do like show and tell demos. And say these are things we built, and product was just like, oh, that's amazing. Like, can we do this? Can we do that? And like we were just shipping.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, okay, we need to do this for the rest of the app. So then we kind of we decided then like over time that just move the other parts of the app in. So I think like within 6 to 9 months, we'd probably moved over all the main workflows, but it did take like a year and a half maybe to get like the whole app over. And there's still some little Rails parts, but they're like specifically we're going to keep them in Rails. But so that's kind of our journey to adopt it, and we've pretty much been with it ever since.
Yeah, right. So that means it's proven to be the right.
Yeah, because it's just like even back
right.
then, if you remember, like React had only, I think, I can't remember his name, but he gave that talk, Pete Hunt, and it was just wildly controversial, like React, like oh my, like throwing away rethinking best practices or whatever it was. And so we looked at that and we're like, yeah, it's a bit kind of out there. We know it won't succeed. Or not even that we said that, it was just a bit wild. We looked at other frameworks, but there was nothing that had that strong opinion. And then there was also the fact that Gavin had used it in big apps in previous roles. And it was like, there's a lot of this stuff you can get out of the box here. So, and it just, there wasn't much out there that had those strong opinions. And as I said in my talk earlier, we just focused on building our product. We didn't need to think about all the glue and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, and have you ever sort of experimented with other technologies?
Well, yeah, like we do have other technologies because we have this idea of core technologies at Intercom. It's kind of based on, like, we have a lot of ex-Amazon folks, so that they have this kind of, it's like Etsy, where it's like use boring software or something like that. So we have kind of core technologies that we're like, okay, all our back-end stuff is going to be Rails, all our front-end stuff is going to be, so for the teammate app, it's Ember. Yeah. But for our messenger, that's built in React. Because it's a completely separate use case. It's not like a long-lived application where our customers boot it up in the morning and sit. Yeah. And we some of them sit in it for weeks. Like actually, we have the data which shows they haven't. This app is still pinging weeks later. Our marketing site is next. So we still look at other technologies, but for our use case for the teammate app, Ember fits.
Yeah. Awesome. And we can talk more about sort of use cases and different technologies with different use cases and so on later maybe. What was the story like at HashiCorp, Jamie? And I know you joined long after they started to use Ember, right?
Yeah. So I don't date back quite far enough, but I asked a couple of our more tenured UI engineers, Michael Lang and Matthew Irish, and they said, similar to Intercom, it was kind of the Rails connection to begin with, that they realized they needed, I think they were starting their UI journey and realized they needed some sort of framework and had the Yehuda connection, so off they went. And I think it started off in HashiCorp is a portfolio company, so there are 8 different products, as you gathered in Alexi's talk. So it started off in the UI of one product and then found itself in another one, and then in the kind of control panel for the SaaS offering, and now basically all of our product UIs are Ember, and the marketing sites are Next.js, which I think is a common state of affairs.
Yeah. Was there a specific reason sort of to unify all of these UIs in Ember, or sort of whether maintained by different teams even, and they couldn't theory have chosen other things, or
I was curious about that too and asked, and there wasn't, in theory, another product team could have and still could say, we don't want to use Ember, we want to use React instead, but it hasn't happened yet. Yeah. I think they look around and see how the other products are able to get a lot done with relatively few engineers and say, this seems good then. Yeah. The other side of it for HashiCorp is for For the open source products like Console and Vault and Nomad, something that HashiCorp really likes to do is to ship one of these tools as a single binary. Go makes that really easy to do. And another thing Go lets you do is take a load of stuff, a load of bytes, and just pack them into that binary. And so in the case of Nomad, Vault, and Console and some other products, that includes the Ember UI. So the Ember app sits in the same repo as the Go backend, and do the production build, take those results, smash them into this one binary. And it turns out that the SPA model is really well suited to that. And Ember is kind of, I think, the only framework that has stuck with the SPA model in a real way. Everyone else has kind of gone to this mode of some things are smeared onto the server and your app kind of exists spread out, whereas a single thing, a little discrete client that you can stick in a package, works very well for the HashiCorp case. And then in the case of the control panel that Alexi was talking about, it turns out that Ember engines and the conventions have allowed it to scale up to a huge number of engineers shipping independently with separate concerns, with separate sets of dependencies, but all in the same kind of playground.
How many engineers do you each have working on the code base, by the way? I think that's very interesting for like smaller companies also to hear these like huge numbers in comparison. So Intercom has around...
Yeah, so the stats I pulled were like over 150 people contributed. I think that was in 2022. I haven't pulled it for 2023. But and like there's over 30 teams.
And HashiCorp?
Yeah, going by Alexi's stats, it seems to be on the around 100 or something like that. And we don't...
That's massive.
But we don't all have to be aware of each other all the time, which is pretty critical. And I think another thing that has kept HashiCorp with Ember is the idea of everyone moving forward together, which I think is a better way to put it than simply backwards compatibility. Manifests itself in some really interesting ways. I think everyone always talks about the Glimmer transition, but to me, the example that I love the most is Ember's testing framework. And the idea that you can have a test suite, a huge sprawling test suite, as long as it's written in the async await style, you can take Ember A11y testing, you can install it, one line of configuration, now your entire test suite is audited for accessibility. I mean, that's incredible. I think for most other toolkits, you would need to rewrite your test suite in something different to get that benefit.
And that's a very good point. So let's hear about Heroku's story with Ember from Jesse.
Similarly to Jamie at HashiCorp, I joined Heroku because I wanted to join Heroku, and I loved Heroku, and sort of walked into Ember as the framework that we were already using. I think it's a similar story when I looked into it. We've been using Ember since around 2014, and it came from a background of, so we're on Dashboard, and Dashboard is our biggest Ember application. Dashboard's on version 6 now. Version 5 was Ruby on Rails. And so we made this transition from Rails, I think similarly to some of the other stories, probably for similar reasons. I was just talking to Gail Frederick, who's our CTO of Heroku, actually just before I jumped on the panel here, a little bit about this. And I think one of the reasons that I've become so attracted to Ember, and I think it's worked so well for us, is, Heroku solves this platform as a service problem where we're taking the infrastructure part of what we do out of building software, and we're focusing more on solving business solutions. And interestingly enough, I think Ember actually is very similar in sort of a software philosophy perspective, because it focuses a little bit more on conventions than configuration. And so those conventions have worked really, really well for us. We have a few other products written in other languages right now, or in other frameworks. And what we found is the one that's been the most sustainable for us has been the stuff that we've written in Ember. And so one of the reasons we thought about making more of an investment here is, to be candid, like, we're already very heavily invested in Ember. I'd say it's probably 60 to 70% of our product solution. So it would cost a lot more to do a rewrite and get off of it than it would to move the things that aren't Ember to Ember. And the second is the stuff that has been written in languages that are not Ember have become very hard to maintain, and we're very customized. And so we'd like to go back to that convention across all of our platforms for a couple reasons. The first is it simplifies everything, and it invests in a framework that we know has worked really, really well for us. And the second is it allows us to have more operating margin when developers aren't switching context between products and what they're working on. They can essentially have more velocity for what they're trying to deliver on, and you can have more engineers available to work on these things. So for us, like it wasn't even much of an argument. Like it was just this thing's been working well for us, and we'd like to make it easier for more of our team to be able to work on it, especially when hiring new engineers. So while I didn't come from like a heavy Ember background into this, I've come to really appreciate what it provides for the developer community, and am looking very, very forward to making a lot more investments into Ember and the framework itself.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Yeah, great. So I think one common thing sort of among Heroku and HashiCorp and Intercom is sort of that you all work on sort of like rather big and complex, like desktop productivity applications, essentially, right? So it seems like that's Ember's sweet spot, right? Although it's not sort of like officially the message of the framework or anything, but that's like certainly a unifying thing, right? And then sort of you said for the Intercom widget, you're using React because Ember is not maybe such a great fit, right? So I don't know. Like, I don't really have a specific question to that, to be honest. But like, what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, well, yeah, like I can just speak specifically about our use case and where we think Ember shines, and that's like, yes, long-lived SPAs.
Yeah.
Years ago when we were originally, like, I think the messenger originally was JavaScript, just vanilla JavaScript. Then at some point we adopted Backbone, and then at some point it was refactored into React. But there was a discussion like, oh, should we use Ember? But Ember like tries to own the page, so it was just never going to be a starter there. And even just the bundle size and all that sort of stuff. So that's why for that specific case, like has to be React.
Yeah.
And then with the next, like the app was, can't remember what it was, but it's only been Next.js for the last like 2 years. And in that case, they saw value in all the stuff that Next gave them with the SSR and all this kind of stuff. And that was just an obvious choice for them. They did look at fast boot and stuff, but it didn't. It seemed like Next was a better choice for them. And that's fine.
Can be a bit hairy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and I correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think there is a good story for like an Ember app that doesn't own the URL. Like we've had like Glimmer and stuff like that, but that it kind of is more experimental potentially. So yeah, there could have been an argument that we could have doubled down and said, oh yeah, we'll use Glimmer.js, but no, we didn't. Yeah, we chose React.
Yeah. Like, do Heroku and HashiCorp have sort of other sort of use cases where you're using different technology, or where you have maybe looked at Ember and like decided for it or against it, or looked at other technologies for those desktop apps? And I mean, like obviously Heroku sort of is migrating these kinds of things away from React and back to Ember. But sort of have you sort of evaluated like other technologies or Ember in other contexts? Is there something that sort of you can share maybe?
I'll let Jesse speak to that first, because I think Heroku's story is interesting in this regard, and then I can say some things from HashiCorp.
Yeah, you know what? I think it's interesting. We've been growing. We're growing a lot right now. We have a lot of there's a lot of jobs open at Heroku, and what I've found is, I've hired some very talented React engineers to come work on Ember, and one of the things that they've come into while they work there is, okay, here's how Ember works, and let's get familiar with that, and then okay, here are these other solutions that we own right now that are React oriented, And it's interesting to see a heavily like career-driven React engineer look at things and go, you know what, I think we should move this over to Ember, which has been it's sort of like reinforced that case that I was concerned about of after looking at all these things and even going with very talented React engineers, that it would make a lot more sense architecturally to take this surface area that is an Ember right now and move it over to our existing Ember framework, or to create a new Ember app, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, just in sustainability, in simplicity, in making hiring more easy, onboarding better. So from every perspective, like I was considering and thinking I might run into the opposite, where it would be like, oh, like, well, we already have this React stuff. Let's take all the Ember stuff and move it over to that. I've run into the opposite. And so that's only further reinforced our desire and our passion to further invest and support in Ember and help it grow.
And then, yeah, at HashiCorp, like at Intercom, the marketing sites are made in Next, and they've got some lovely tools. Those teams put to work there. And they work in their style, but there's no acrimony. The teams get on very well and appreciate the things that are nice about each other's tools. I think that I've definitely worked in companies in the past where there'd be engineers on the team who'd kind of chafe at having to use Ember and would want to use the latest tools. Yeah. I think that Ember's TypeScript support and Glint answers a lot of those questions now. I think a lot of what people were wanting was that kind of tooling, and I think Glint proving that we can have those sorts of niceties too, sort of quashed a lot of those doubts. So in HashiCorp's case, it's surprising. People, by and large, are more interested in the features they can build than the shiny new things they want to use to build them.
Yeah, that's all great to hear. So I think those are sort of three very sort of like positive success stories, right? Sort of you've built on them for many years successfully. Sort of you see better sort of value delivery than with other technologies, or sort of like more efficient value delivery. I mean, yet still, I want to sort of go back to sort of my talk from yesterday a bit, and I want to talk about like thoughts and concerns, sort of you as companies with obviously huge investments in Ember might have, right? With like hundreds of people over many years sort of have you written your code bases. So these are substantial investments, right? So I don't know, what are your concerns perhaps, and sort of what do you do also to sort of address those concerns and sort of like secure those investments and help to ensure a positive future? Like, anyone wants to go first? I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fine. So, I guess like you called it out yesterday. Like life changes for people, and people step away, and like over the last few years, like a few of the core team members have stepped back, and that's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. I think, and the kind of community is getting smaller. So one worry is like the higher bus factor of like some of the projects potentially and the kind of people contributing. But I think it's, on us as companies as well who use it heavily to kind of try and step up, and that's what I guess like front end tech we're trying to lean in there a bit more. We're supporting the Embroider initiative. Yeah. Because I do think the Embroider project is key for this, because essentially, like Ed touched on it earlier, his point is like, why should we need to maintain a build system, whereas like we can use a wider ecosystem and actually then focus on our key differentiators and try and like improve the health that way. So rather than be spread over all these projects, let's try and like remove that. All the things we need to focus on, just focus on this area. So I think, to me, like getting Embroider over the line, I think is key for this, to get like Vite especially, because the tooling around it. And then as well, we don't want, obviously, a Python 2 to 3 like schism. So I think there's a lot of, even if all the add-ons don't come with us, there's a path forward. So like if you're using this this is not the way to do it anymore. This is the way forward.
Yeah.
And if there's add-ons that need to be migrated, they're migrated. So
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. And I know EmberConf is also member of the Rails Foundation, right? So sort of doing that kind of thing, sort of supporting the, like ecosystem. So if you build on is like
exactly.
seems to be sort of a general.
Yeah, like Rails is one of the core technologies, and we're part of the Rails Foundation. We have 1 or 2 folks on the Rails core team and stuff.
Yeah.
So like we invest there because we like it's like a keystone block to our like business.
Yeah. Right. Heroku, HashiCorp, very cool. Jamie?
I think every time a concern comes to mind, I'm realizing that they're actually increasingly quite well answered today. So in the past, I would have said that, for potential candidates, they might worry, not necessarily that Ember was a turn-off because it wasn't new and shiny, but they might think like, will I be building up expertise in a very niche technology? But I think with Embroider and Ember sort of opening up to the wider ecosystem, that kind of gets answered a bit. Like if I would say that yes, if you become an absolute expert on Broccoli JS, that maybe is not the most marketable skill you could possibly have.
Yeah.
But that isn't going to be the reality with Embroider. You'll get to become an expert in Vite and whatever comes after it. And I would have said the problem of add-ons going dormant and becoming unmaintained, but that's kind of answered by the same mechanism. We won't really need add-ons anymore. We can just plug directly into any JavaScript thing. So
yeah, that's a good point.
So yeah, and then I think, as Ed mentioned in the AMA, kind of community excitement and energy is important. I think a bunch of communities probably wondered if they'd bounce back at all post-pandemic, and here we are, Emberfest in attendance is, from what I've seen of other conferences out there, not too bad. So
yeah. What is Heroku's sort of standpoint on that, and sort of supporting the foundations you build on, or worrying about them maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it's from a couple perspectives, right? I think what Embroider is doing is really important. And I think that's really going to help Ember from a financial and contributor standpoint. And that's something that I'm going to be looking into this year. But as far as the ways I think that also can be very, very helpful is, when you get your engineering team and let's say you have some products that are built using the Ember framework, when you can spend some of that engineering team's time focusing on things like contributing to the Ember open source project, it's kind of a win-win, right? Because on one end, you're making investments towards the platform that you're long-term dependent on. On the other end, your engineers are growing and learning and understanding what they're working against even more. So you get a growth opportunity for the team that's working on it, and you get this renewed kind of more investment in the thing that you're dependent on. And so I think I think it's important for other companies and folks that are invested in Ember or have engineering teams that work on Ember to kind of look at both of those options and find a way to invest in this platform just like you would in if you were paying a licensing fee for another platform, right? Yeah. So I'm a big fan of the community-owned aspect of Ember and how we're sharing development there. And I think if more folks could get on board with taking some of their engineering time and putting it towards Ember's investment, as well as championing, pushing forward efforts like Embroider with financial investments, I think it really, really could help not just the community, but the businesses that are invested in Ember. So for us, that's one of the main reasons why we continue to try and find more ways to support it.
Yeah, and it's supporting sort of open source, like a general thing that Heroku does sort of strategically. So like, I know you've always been providing like free hosting and so on for like various projects. I mean that like those are small contributions, but is that sort of you're doing on a strategic level in a way?
It's been, just like a lot of the tech industry, we've been through a pretty heavy crunch over the last 4 years, and so things got really, really tight, transparently. And I think we're on an upswing in a growth trajectory right now that's really exciting. That's been, supported and backed by Salesforce, but also by the community, and we want to, as a part of this upswing, grow with open source projects and help towards open source projects like Ember. And so this will be something that we're going to be looking more and more into over the next year as we're on this growth upswing. And we'd like Ember to grow right alongside us at Heroku. I mean, look at the color of the auditorium you're in. Like, it's Heroku everywhere. So I'm a big fan of supporting open source projects, and so is Heroku. And we're kind of starting to get into a position where we can do a lot more of that. And we're really looking forward to it.
Yeah. That's great to hear. And sort of the point about sort of the economy having been a bit, bad, but now being on the sort of way back up again. That's a very good point. Also, like, I mean, that also sort of hit us a bit with EmberFest, right? We used to have way more logos on those signs there, and this year, sort of budgets were a bit tighter, right? But as Jesse said, yeah, it should get better soon, hopefully. I think we're already out of time. I would like to end with or two questions actually that I ask everybody, and then you answer like relatively short, whatever, like 30 seconds, a minute. Take as much time as you want, but sort of concise answers. And the question is, what was your EmberFest highlight this year? And that's maybe a bit unfair for Jesse because you aren't actually here, but maybe, I don't know, there's a highlight that you saw in the stream. And what's your guess for where we will be next year? Which country, which city, or which one would you like it to be? And I would say let's start with Jesse, and then Jamie, Pat.
Shameless plug. It's great to see Jamie. That's my highlight at EmberFest, and I'm hoping him and I more. I know he's over in Europe, and it's been a while since I've been overseas over there, but it's really great to see you. I live in the U.S. I get that. I've traveled Europe. I love Florence. I think it would be cool to see something in Florence, Italy, but that's just myself, and I love the food there. So if I were to be able to get travel next year to come to EmberFest, I think that's someplace I'd love to visit.
Yeah, that's certainly a good option. I think everybody loved Rome 2 years ago, and Florence would be like maybe even better. Yeah. Jamie?
My highlight was I adored Marin's talk. That intersection of languages and grammars and Git was just perfection. Yeah. My other highlight was getting to see my very dear friend Drew Neal in person again for the first time in ages, and we even snuck down to the green room and jammed on ukulele and clarinet for a little bit. Really? And as to where it will be next year, I personally would love to see a return to Budapest. It's a city I've always wanted to go to, never had the chance yet, and it would be a great reason to go.
Mine has actually been I don't get to go to conferences that much. I have 3 girls, so I just don't get to get away. But it's actually I've attended them remotely, but the hallway track part of this. So I think Alberto down there, we were in the pub last night, and we were like, "What's your Twitter handle?" And it turned out the two of us have followed each other for years. Yeah. So Beto Canto, probably most people know him as that. And where is he? Life Art. Like, everyone in the community's built so many tools. So I think so we were just outside, and he was like, "Oh, I'm Life Art." I was like, "Oh my God." So I got a picture with him, sent it to the team at Intercom, and all that. But as for next year, I think it should be somewhere new. And I think we should go to Poznan and let Tom make host us, because I think it'd be great crack. Yeah, so.
I think as well. Yeah, great. So, I mean, that's it for the panel. Thanks again for joining. Thanks, Jesse, Jamie, Pat. And as Pat said, like the hallway track is always an important part, and we have like another hallway track with a party now. Yeah, looking forward to that. And yeah, thanks again for coming. Hope to see you again next year at the next EmberFest.
Thank you.